I'm Dave Johnson and I work in the events industry. Normally at this time of year I'd be ramping up for a busy summer. Either doing something like this, or like this. However, because of coronavirus, things look a bit different this year. I spent a lot of the last few weeks learning, reading, building Lego, and catching up with friends across the south coast. So far, I've stayed out of creating anything because I needed to just learn to live with the situation. I'd also not found anything that I thought would help anyone right now. But then one of those catch-ups became a much more detailed conversation on streaming. Who's doing it right? Who's playing a sort of catch-up game? What could smaller churches learn from those that are much bigger? By the end of the chat, I was mulling over quite a big question. How can smaller churches approach streaming, especially getting worship right? So I called a couple of friends and told them about this crazy idea I had that we could use the cheapest possible equipment and free software to make a worship video to help smaller churches. And I fully expected them to say no. But they said yes. And not only did they say yes, that they suggested other people that I should contact and interview. And they said, had I thought about this idea or that idea? And it's all helped to shape this. So what we're going to be doing over the next 6 parts, and I've tried to keep these episodes to 20 minutes, is look at how we can record worship in a really good way, with some really practical input from some of my friends who are either out there leading worship, or they're MDs, or they work in the wider production sphere. And our aim is to help you lead worship the best you can during this completely unprecedented time. So that's the idea. Myself and a couple of friends are going to take the multi-tracks living room sessions version of Bethel Music's Raise a Hallelujah. We're then going to explore the possibilities of free software and recording on a budget to see what kind of quality we can get. But beyond that, we also want to take the really tough challenge of recording using just an iPhone and just what we have around to get a completely stripped back version. Along the way, we're going to hear from a few friends of mine from across the UK who are experts in streaming, in tech, who are worship leaders and musical directors to give a really broad insight on what we can be doing. But first, I sat down with Mikey Powell, who's one of the worship leaders at New Community Church in Southampton. He releases music through Homegrown Music, and we chatted about growing up in a more rural environment, how the church there are doing, and how they've had to adapt for this time. Mikey Powell, thank you so much for getting involved in this ever so slightly crazy project.
Welcome.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm quite enjoying lockdown. I know for a lot of people it's a bit more of a challenge, but for me as an introvert without any children, it's a big win. Uh,
I seem to remember that you grew up in a slightly more rural location, um, and that's really what we're aiming for here. How are they coping with making the jump to online church?
so yeah, I grew up in Somerset, a little village church that meets in an old barn. It's a fairly rich heritage of music there, so I think they're better equipped than maybe some others. So basically, what they do is they begin the meeting all together on Zoom. They get put into breakout rooms, which is I've not tried that with Zoom, but apparently it's a possibility. Different of like up to 6 people, and then they bring back into a main session. I think what has been happening is they've actually pre-recorded the worship, so a little bit like you said, and so they pre-recorded that and played through someone's computer. Then I guess they're sharing the audio, rather than mostly playing live. I think they started by doing that, but they've struggled. They found it a bit difficult to do that live. And then there's some people who prepared words, share some stuff, take communion together, usually have a song to finish. So it's quite simple, but with that pre-recorded element again. But I also know that, my auntie and my mum, who go to different churches in that sort of rural area, have both really enjoyed plugging into what we've been doing, what we've been able to do in community with a slightly bigger resource. And so yeah, it's difficult. I think the important thing for them has been their community. They can still maintain that through Zoom, through that online experience.
I think that's an interesting one. I've seen a few churches that run like a stream alongside a Zoom, so you something a little more produced with
Yeah.
a community element. Is that how you're doing it at New Community?
So at New Community, we just have a YouTube stream. So it all comes on there. So the community of that is all the live chat happening, which is actually quite a lot of fun. We found that creates a real sense of community. Sometimes more so than we'd had before. It sort of breaks down some of the groups you naturally fall into in church because you're all there together. And so it's a combination of some things that are actually live. It's hosted live, but the worship is pre-recorded. The talk is pre-recorded. There's a few other video elements that will be pre-recorded, and then Tom Ensom, who does this sort of streaming broadcasting thing for a living, he's putting it all together.
For you head up the worship team. I guess you are in quite an interesting position right now. How has heading up that team changed? How has your communication between band members changed? What processes do you go through to get Sunday ready?
So it's already had a couple of different evolutions over the time. So the very first Sunday we went into lockdown, it wasn't quite full lockdown. It was where we couldn't meet in big gatherings. So that way we streamed live from Central Hall. So initially, when that first notice came in, I was communicating with the worship team that the rotas stay in place. We'll try and do social distancing and all be at Central Hall and live stream it from there. So it's still a bit weird to lead worship with an empty room with cameras there. But it's still leading worship with the band. You're still doing the musical thing that all the cues are normal. So that was the first session, and then very quickly after that, we realised actually it's going to lock down properly. So we went into. I gathered what band members I could get from across the city on a Monday afternoon, which isn't always loads. They still actually have work to do, lots of them. And then there we recorded 3 sessions. So that was all then pre-recorded, and Tom edited the video together. He actually drummed and edited, so he couldn't do the live editing as he went. He drummed, then edited it afterwards. So that's how we did it initially, and then more recently, once we've run out of those, we've done this more isolation thing. So I've recorded some worship with video in my garden. So I've done the first bit basically. It's all layered up, then everyone adds their layer. So the more detail of that is that so in order to do it properly, it needs to be done to a click track. This is Noah's back. No, you can't go on the desk. No, let's go down there. It needs to be done to a click track, but the difficulty with that is that it's easy for me to record to a click track for one song. I can do that on Logic. I can send that to someone. It's quite easy. We've done a few of those collaborations. But when you're leading worship, you want to record a few, and they're not all going to be at the same tempo. And I don't want to stop to click next on the thing. I want to continue the flow of worship. I want to make it as not distracting as possible. And so that was where Ben came in. So he suggested working with Ableton and having basically a MIDI keyboard down by my foot, that when I want to change song, I can just mash, and one of the keys makes sure that it goes to the next song, and then that gets recorded along with my vocals and stuff. So then I have a whole set of worship that's recorded and videoed, and I can send the audio files onto the next person. Actually, no, before I send them on, I then have to do some musical direction. I record that separately afterwards, because all the things I try and communicate with my body language and my signals and my, giving cues, or them just being able to hear my playing. And this is in natural things you get when you're in a band that they can't see it. So I have to then be really specific and cue that musically.
I think that makes sense. So, um, you mentioned that you're using Ableton
Yeah.
for your click tracks. Does that mean you suddenly have two laptops around?
No, so I've just got one laptop that's I'm recording into Ableton as well as using the clip track from there, and then the clip track is also being recorded as an audio file. That's the only thing that my laptop is doing, is taking all its operating click and recording audio, and then camera does the camera stuff.
Yeah. So was that quite a big step up for you to suddenly get your head around Ableton?
Yes, it would have been an even bigger step up if I hadn't had Ben, basically. I didn't have a clue how to do that, get past um, that barrier of needing to control the click and needing that click to then be heard by other people. So yeah, Ableton's been a little bit of a learning curve for me. I've not used it before, but that's probably potentially due to my own sort of laziness, and that I've been happy to let someone else deal with that, and I'll just lead worship. So it's good for me to do that. It's been a good challenge, but it's a weird one. Having used Logic a lot, I'm quite used to how Logic works, and Ableton just works in a different way. It's intuitive in different ways and unintuitive in other different ways. So it's been a little bit of a quick learning curve.
Let's really quickly end on this. Getting used to click track.
Yeah.
How, for a smaller church, would you suggest that if they want to start using click track in this time, because they're going towards multi-musicians, who are going to send on files, how is it best to get used to the click track?
I mean, as with anything, click comes with practice. Just comes with doing it. So if you're preparing your set, looking up tempos are fairly easy to look up for the most part. If you search for a song on Google, you can search for that song and press tempo. Usually it comes up. If not, if you get a metronome app on your phone, which I'd recommend anyway, you can usually tap the tempo along with the record, plug your headphones in while you play it, get used to playing with the click. It might be that click is just too sparse for some people. They just can't quite get used to it. And so in that case, using a loop, like a shaker or a drum loop, sometimes is much easier because that will keep you directly in time, but it's more like what you're used to playing along with a band. So just getting used to it. There is no real shortcut other than just doing it, but a slightly easier way sometimes is using a loop rather than the click itself.
Mikey, thank you so much for joining me.
You're most welcome, Dave. Thank you for having me.
I'm looking forward to seeing your results.
Yeah.
Reaper.
I'm looking forward to giving it a go, seeing what we can do. I think this is really great. Love what you're doing, because I think it's actually really important as a church we remain that what the smaller churches are doing and continue to do is really important. I think it's not good enough to just say, oh, there's plenty of good services you can go and get involved with. I think that's what church is. I think church is community, what we're doing. I think it's so important that we're able to provide people with the tools they need to do what we need to do in this weird time.
I'm now going to chat to my friend Ben Reed. I've known Ben since 2011. We're both part of New Community Church down Southampton. Together we introduced all kinds of crazy things to their worship team. We introduced MD, we introduced Click, we introduced Tracks, basically anything I could learn from the bigger churches we introduced. Ben, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you very much, Dave. It's fun being part of this conversation. Thank you for inviting me.
Are you part of a conversation with the worship team in how arrangements go together, in terms of song selection, in people developing parts?
Some of the things that we've learned along the way is it's really good to have not only, it's good to have an MD audio track as people are recording, because if you're there at home recording your part for the service coming up, it's really useful if the musical director is saying, and we're building, we're going to stop on 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and there you go. And then it's almost like you're in the same room, because when you put all those videos together, everyone's done the same thing at the same time. Everyone's building in the right place, everyone's dropping in the right place, everyone's moving from section to section of the song in the same place.
It leads nicely into the second question, which is what's the biggest challenge that you've faced right now?
I did a worship collaboration with one worship leader, and to get him started, he was just doing a 3-song set. He sent it to me, and then I put all the other parts on it, and got a backing vocalist involved to record on it as well. Now that was really, really challenging, because he wasn't using a click track, and he was completely free. So the tempo kind of fluctuated a great deal, which then took me a lot of time, because I had to learn that 3-song set really well to know when he was going to speed up and slow down. So part of that process, again, I've entered into a period of training with him, so I can say, okay, click is a bit challenging for him, but we can set up loops and drum beats so that, he's not going to use Ableton, but he uses an app that displays his chord sheets. You can attach a song to each page. So we can record a loop that lasts for 4 or 5 minutes, attach it to that one song, so everything he plays will be perfectly in time. It feels very natural to him because he's playing along to a loop, not a click. And then when he swipes so that he goes on to the next song, the next drum beat comes in his ears, and then everything that he records on that song will also be perfectly in time.
So the big thing, and part of this is, I've chatted to the multi-tracks people, guys. They've got their living room sessions, which are designed to help like some of the churches out during this time with slightly more stripped back arrangements. But have you guys been using tracks during this lockdown period, or have you been creating things quite organically?
And I think Multitracks has done an amazing thing with the new format that they've brought out, because if you've got 1 or 2 people leading worship, you actually don't want it to sound like a huge production with 4 synth parts, 8 guitar parts, all the full drum kit part, as well as percussion samples, all of that, because it just kind of looks and feels wrong. There's the disparity between what you can see and what you can hear. So something that's stripped back is really, really good. So in our the way we do things on our team, we haven't actually used tracks, and I would say we're very, very fortunate, just because we've got a big worship team. Most of us have been on the team for quite a number of years, and the only reason I say that is that we're very used to how we work together on that team.
Playing together.
Yes, yeah. So particularly because I've been working with Mikey for a long time, I tend to know very quickly what he wants, and he has a really good relationship with the drummers, so that when he's describing something, the drummers know how to respond. So I would say that we're very, very fortunate that we've got a really, really strong and talented team. I would say that certainly and not only that, all of us are very used to home recording, and that technology isn't overwhelming or intimidating. I think for any smaller church, or a church that is kind of struggling in this kind of online only format, I think tracks are going to be a wonderful addition, because it puts less pressure on the volunteers probably that are trying to put something together for the times of worship.
And then we've spoken before about actually when you go down this track route, things are quite rigid structurally.
Yeah.
How do you get around that?
Again, I think you need to just decide what you want out of it and develop a process to deliver that. So, as I say, in our own context, Mikey can actually be fairly free and spontaneous because he's just working for the click correct for each song. So as far as structure goes, he can absolutely do what he likes and how he feels. I think if I were leading a set on my own, I might do it like that. And then if I was using a track to bring in all the other elements that I felt were appropriate for that song, I'm sure that that most of that structure would be the same as probably something that you'd get from multi-tracks up to a point. And if I started being a little bit more spontaneous, probably towards the end of the song, then I would chop up the track accordingly. So yeah, I'm not sure what your suggestion is going to be with that, Dave, because I've used a free program called Audacity, where you can see the sound waves very, very easily, and with a little bit of know-how, you can chop out a section and repeat it and move it around and all the rest of it. I'm not sure everyone would like to give that a go. Maybe that's part of a further conversation.
Yeah, I think those types of programs aren't necessarily designed for that. I know I use Logic myself. I know for me, part of this challenge is going, we're going to use some different software.
Yeah.
All of us, but it's free, and we're going to look at what can be done with it.
Yeah.
I know if it were me in Logic, if I know the tempo of a song, I can put that tempo in. I will then put the multi-tracks in, so they're there.
Yeah.
And it all goes to a grid. So therefore, I can create markers. If I want to chop the click or whatever at a certain point, I can chop exactly and know that it's going to be cut in the right point. But that is a cost. I think Logic's currently like 150 quid on the Apple App Store. It's only Apple that. So you have a minimum level there to get into. We're not
I think
that. We're thinking about trying to get a bit general with everything.
Yeah. So I think with most pieces of hardware, like small keyboards and things like that, you get a light version of Ableton, which I know you can do a lot of different things with a lot of bits of software. I absolutely love Ableton. It's absolutely brilliant at all this kind of stuff. It's a non-linear digital audio workstation, in which case it's designed like you've got all your different parts of your song, and it's non-linear in that you can actually put them together in whatever order you want. So I'd really encourage people to get on the learning curve with Ableton, because it's just once you develop your workflow a little bit, it's pretty much immediate. You can put things together exactly how you want them.
Yeah. So does that help you get around your rigidity issues?
Rigidity, yeah. Oh, absolutely, yeah. So again, not in the context with New Community, because we follow Mikey's structure, but for something that I'm doing myself, absolutely. I'll just put the different song sections into Ableton, and then I'll trigger them as I go.
That is amazing. Well, Ben, I'm super glad you're up for this challenge. I'm pretty sure it's going to stretch all of us in a few different ways. I know that both you and Mikey use Logic too, or that your preference is Ableton. So going into something completely different, and getting a head around it and seeing what can be achieved, not necessarily for us, but for others, is going to be a big thing. The full version of those interviews will be up on the YouTube at the weekend. In the next episode, we're going to be taking the super basic steps of recording using an iPhone, editing it on an iPad, and looking at the results. See you next time.